and welcome back to Monster Minis. Today I'm going to be finishing up my Star Wars Legion Endor Cleanup Crew army with this AT-ST. Chewy commandeering the AT-ST in Return of the Jedi is one of my favorite cinematic moments. The kit was easy to assemble, and Taimea's extra thin cement did a great job. This AT-ST is going to be the centerpiece of this army. It already stands imposing on the battlefield when you're playing a game of Star Wars Legion, but I wanted to push it up another level. I decided I was going to add working blasters. The blasters will be 3-volt red LEDs, and I wanted to mount them in the barrels. I started by using my pin vise to drill out the barrel as a place to mount the LED. I mounted brass rod in the hole because it's conductive and it would give the LED some rigidity, and if I needed to, I could solder the circuit directly to the brass rod rather than having to run an additional wire. After I had this circuit assembled, tested, and ready to go, I noticed they weren't exactly lined up with the barrel, so I attempted to adjust them, and I broke them both. So I grabbed another set of these LEDs and decided to approach this a little bit differently so that this set of blasters would not meet the same fate. I decided to give myself some more room to work with here, and I needed a bigger area to mount the brass rod, and decided that I would just rebuild the blaster barrel to fit the LED scene once the LEDs were securely fastened. I used clear heat shrink on these to give the LEDs a little bit more rigidity since they were going to be hanging out in front of the vehicle. This kit provided a unique opportunity in that it came with both an Imperial commander for the AT-ST and with Chewbacca himself. So I thought, why not use this to my advantage? This is going to be used in Legion games, so I decided it needed a switch. And what better way to activate the blasters than by putting the commander in the hatch? So I ended up using a magnetic switch that will be mounted inside the commander's hatch of the AT-ST, and a 1/4-inch magnet that will be mounted in the base of both Chewbacca and the Imperial officer. So when they go into the commander's hatch, the circuit will close and the blasters will come on. I wasn't sure how I was going to hide the electronics, so I wanted to build it first. And once that was complete, I could use the paint job to hide the electronics. Cool thing about these magnetic switches is you don't have to have actual contact for the switch to activate. So by drilling a hole in the commander's hatch, as long as the commander was in the hatch, it would activate. I found a coin battery holder that I thought looked kind of like an AT-ST component. I wanted to make sure though that if the battery needed to be changed, it was in a location that didn't require disassembly or really putting any part of the model at risk to change it, so it hangs off the back. I was relieved once I completed the circuit that the blasters did indeed come on when the commander entered the cupola. I primed the model black using Ammo's one-shot primer. This was a fun paint job. The AT-ST that I was recreating from Return of the Jedi did not have a camouflage, and it has a monochromatic color scheme. It's gray. So I needed to make a gray color scheme interesting, and I decided to just go over the top with highlighting. I used a 3-color modulation from Ammo to paint Chewy, starting with Ammo's brown red, then highlighting up with red leather, and highlighting that a final time with burnt sand. With each subsequent layer, I left a little bit of the original color in the pot so that we could get a cleaner and smoother blend. Also adding a little bit of Vallejo's Flow Improver. Anytime I'm highlighting with the airbrush, I like to push the final highlight one step further than I think it really should go, because it's going to get washed down in the wash step. The ATST is painted with Ammo's German Gray modulation set. That starts with their gray dark base, and that'll be lightened with the gray base. I'll bring that up another layer with the gray light base, and then the final highlight will be with the gray highlight. I like that the kit came with the Imperial Commander model, because I used the same color scheme on him that I did on the ATST, and it gave me an opportunity to try what I was thinking on him before I applied it to the larger model. I wanted to find a way to make it interesting, and to make it fun to look at on the table. Not that it wouldn't be with working blasters, but I wanted the paint job to stand on its own. So with each subsequent layer, I picked areas that I thought would be cool highlighted. I didn't necessarily try to follow a lighting scheme. It's somewhere in between a light source from above and a panel-based highlight, because I just picked areas that I thought would look cool with brighter colors. I left the underside dark. I tried to always come up with the next highlight color painted from above, and just pick out the areas that would look coolest with the highlight, knowing that I was going to push this probably further than it needed to go, and then come back in with the wash and wash it down to where it looked cool. These big panels on the side of the ATST, around the command section, and then around the weapon mounts, just had really beautiful lines to be able to come in with the airbrush and pick out those contours and really highlight them with each of these subsequent lighter colors. As the saying goes, a great model paints itself. I really felt like that was true on this one. Going to be using Ammo's Blue for Panzer Gray enamel wash. Ammo really has these color combinations figured out. If you just commit to the pattern that they've laid out, I've been very happy with the results. There weren't a lot of details to paint on this ATST. The only details that were here to paint were the side-mounted weapon pods, the blasters, and the hoses. So the weapon pods and the blasters get a coat of black. My favorite color for hoses is Tamiya's rubber black. With a couple coats, it looks just like rubber. I used Ammo's Dio dry brush paint in gunmetal to come back and dry brush the weapon pods. So I decided to not rebuild the blaster and to just lean into my skills as a painter and just paint the blaster barrels in, rather than try to sculpt them with green stuff or find some other component to build them. Going to be using a weathering stick from Green Stuff World, using Ammo's Dio chipping paint and a little Rot Brawn from Ammo to give it a little bit more of a rusty look. I didn't want to go crazy with the weathering on this ATST. I feel like the Imperial stuff doesn't last long enough to be heavily weathered, so just a little bit. A little chipping on the edges, a little chipping on the raised areas, on areas that would see wear as it was moving through a forest. Went a little heavier on the handholds in areas where people would be moving in and out of the vehicle. It's always scary to me to throw chips on large flat panels of models that are going to be highly visible, but it's worth it. The entire ATST got a heavy coat of this blue wash for Panzer Gray. I later came back off camera with some enamel odorless thinner and removed areas of wash that were sitting on panels or on high areas or areas where I didn't want it. Really just let this go sit in the recesses and bring out the depth and the detail of this model and give it a little bit more of a weathered look. I also hit Chewy with a wash off camera. Going to be using Ammo's acrylic mud for vignettes for this base. This is going to be in the forests of Endor, and the base that came with the model was a very industrial base, so I needed to make sure that I covered up with something that was thick enough. And I really wanted it to look like the ATST was sitting in the groundwork, so I got my knife out and really tried to push this mud up onto the feet, so it did really look like it was crashing through a forest. One of my favorite tricks when you have a model that doesn't have a ton of color contrast on it is to bring in pops of color with the basing. I'm using spiky green, dense green, there are plantain lilies, and some flowers to bring in some color. Gel-based superglue works great for attaching these to the base. And here is the finished model. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.